What's up, everyone? I'm Dennis, the creator of Blockstudio. Welcome to the very first video on this channel. It's been a long time coming.
It's been 84 years.
If you are part of the Facebook group, then you probably know that this has been probably the most requested thing.
Give it to me! Give it to me!
Even more so than features for the plugin itself. I'm stoked that it is finally happening, that this channel is now live and I can start creating content for Blockstudio, show the world how awesome it is. If you don't know what Blockstudio is, it is the easiest and best way to create custom blocks for WordPress. I'm obviously biased since I made it, but I think it's true and I'm going to show you exactly why in this video. So let's get started. Okay, so we get our WordPress install on the left, just running locally. I'm running 2024 and I've set up a child theme that you can see on the right here, running inside of VS Code. So let's make this bigger. And the way Blockstudio works is by creating files, and those files will then be registered as blocks. So every block JSON and index.php or index twig, if you want to use twig pair, will automatically be registered as a block. So let's just create a Blockstudio folder. And for organizational purposes, let's create a my block folder as well. And inside here, I'm going to create our block JSON and fill in all the data. So let's call that my blocks block, an appropriate title. And we'll have to set the Blockstudio key to true here. And of course we need to render something. So let's create an index.php file and let's just render a simple h1 tag saying hello from Blockstudio. Now let's jump back to WordPress. And if everything went well, you can already see it here, my awesome Blockstudio block. That was pretty simple, right? Now, what if I told you that we don't even need an IDE like VS Code or similar to edit our blocks? We can do it right from the WordPress admin. So let's just jump back to our admin and click into Blockstudio. And inside that editor tab, you will see a file system looking UI. And when we click into the block JSON file, you'll notice that this is actually the block that we just created. So Blockstudio actually includes a full editing interface right inside the admin. So we can go over here. It also includes a preview that you can see on the right. You can toggle that on or off depending on your need. And let's just create or edit that index.php and say hello from the Blockstudio editor. Now let's save that and close full screen. Jump back into Hello World. I deleted the block, so let's just reinsert that. And you see that the block was actually saved with the data that we put in from the admin dashboard. Isn't that awesome? I definitely think so. So let's just jump back and maybe create a block that you would use in the real world, like something a bit more complex. I obviously was thinking what to create here with you for the first time on this channel and best showcase Blockstudio's power and the power of blocks in WordPress in general. And I came to the conclusion to create an Accordion block. So let's just go ahead and rename our original folder. Let's call this Accordion. And let's go back into our block JSON file. Let's make this full screen. And let's call this UI Accordion. Title. Let me change as well to Accordion. And let's give this an icon, arrow, down, Alt 2. I don't think many people know that, but HTML is actually already giving you the bare bones of an accordion element. So we just create a div here and give this a class of accordion. And inside of this div, we will use the details element. Details. Now, there should already be something rendered. As you can see, let's just put some content here so you can see the HTML element in action. Pretty cool, isn't it? We can adjust the title using the summary tag. So this will be our title. And this way you can toggle content on and off without any JavaScript, just using HTML. So this is a great base for our custom block, I think. Now let's continue by giving our elements appropriate classes. So let's call this header title. Let's wrap that properly, and we're gonna wrap the content inside of a div as well, like so, and give this a class of accordion content. Save that. And I actually just realized that I forgot to add the base styles of the theme to our little preview here. You can do so by going back to the settings and picking additional asset IDs to be enqueued inside the editor. So we would need the global styles. And if everything worked, then the text should be now sans serif. I think that's enough for now, structure and content-wise. Let's continue with the CSS. Now, creating new files is pretty straightforward with Blockstudio. All you have to do is click the Add New File button and enter your file name. So in our case, we want a CSS, but I don't want to write plain CSS, so we'll call that SCSS. And this will let us write Sass instead of vanilla CSS. Blockstudio will then, on the fly, compile it and enqueue it on the front end when the block is used. I will show that in detail later. So let's start with our accordion selector and continue with our header. Maybe give it some padding to start off with. And that's doing nothing. Oh, because it's called title. Let's actually restructure this and give this a p tag. Give that a class of accordion header title and give that title again. Now the extra padding is probably coming from the title. Since it's a p tag, there you go, and the browser will always add our margin to p tags by default. So let's get rid of the default style. Give that a class, a display of flex, and align items center. So we know there will be always centered. And let's do justify content as well, because space between, because I just realized we also forgot to put our indicator into the structure here, because right now there's really no indicator that the content is showing, besides the actual content showing, of course, but usually there would be like a little arrow here. So this styling is just to accommodate for that. We'll add that in a bit. Let's also add some hover styles. Let's do background color of gray. That's working, and let's give this also a different cursor. So we have this pointing cursor here. And then I also seen that content is obviously not aligned to the title. So let's give this the same padding. We can probably just set padding like so. There we go. All right, that's looking good. Let's save that. And let's add the indicator icon I was just talking about. So it would live next to the title. Let's give this a class of header indicator. And I haven't talked about that yet, but this preview will evaluate PHP. So if you write PHP, now, since this is not valid, PHP will return an error, but you can say echo hi, oops, and it will render echo, but we want our indicator icon to take that place, and we're going to use one of Blockstudio's built-in functions and the icon. And we are going to use the icon set iron icons and the icon chevron down sharp. And that is not rendering right now for whatever reason. Probably because we didn't give it a height yet. That's right, probably. Let's check. Indicator, height, give it a run. REM, is that the right class? Header indicator. Header indicator. And I forgot our display, of course. Now it's working. Maybe let's make it a little bit bigger. I think that's better. Now, it's still not doing anything, of course, since we haven't used any CSS to style it when the accordion is open. So if we go back to our structure, we can actually keep the details open by just applying a data attribute to it. And this data attribute we're going to use for the styling of our indicator. So when details is open, we are going to rotate our indicator by 180 degrees, which should give us that classic accordion feel. And I think with that, we're good regarding styling and structure. Let's save that again. So let's jump back into the Hello World post and just insert accordion. And yeah, everything's working. Let's just check it on the front end. Same thing here. So you probably noticed that we didn't really write any code to enqueue the style sheets or compile the SCSS to CSS. Blockstudio is just doing all of that for us, which is great. Let's continue building our blocks. So I think the logical next step for us would be to insert some dynamic data. So we can choose this title in the editor and add our content in the content field here. So we're actually going to jump back into the block JSON and we'll do one thing in the start, and that is exactly add the Blockstudio schema. So we're getting neat autocorrection here. So you see that these are the available options for us here. And since we want to add a text field to use for the title, we're going to use the attributes. And inside of these attributes, we're going to call it title. And the type is going to be text. Now you can see the preview here already. It's kind of missing a label to give us the full picture. We're going to call that header. And there you go. Now this is going to look the same inside of Gutenberg, of course. Let's just jump back to our post here. And if we select this block, you'll see that now we have a text field in the sidebar. So let's call that our accordion title. Of course, now it's not connected to our actual template yet. So we're just going to jump back into here and render that. Attributes. You don't see anything here right now. This is because the editor here has no knowledge of the data being put in Gutenberg. So what we'll have to do here is add an example key and just add some example data to the title we added earlier. I'm just going to call that accordion title, save, and now we should see the title being displayed here. Now this is only visible in the editor here, not in Gutenberg. So let's go back to Gutenberg, and if we reload this, boom, we should have our title that we can change, of course. I changed title, everything's working. Cool. Now let's go back to the editor for one more moment. This is perfectly fine in regards to editing your data, having fields in the sidebar. I guess you know that from other solutions like ICF blocks or MB blocks, Metabox blocks.
You could do so.
However, the new block editor is giving us much better tools to create a more interactive editing experience. So let's just jump back into our editor and do that. We don't want this to be a text, but a rich text type. And we don't need to label anymore because it's actually not going to be part of our sidebar. And inside of our template, we get rid of this and we're gonna create or make our paragraph a rich text element. Now, let's see what this means for the editor in a bit. Class is correct. Let's add the correct attribute, which was title, and a placeholder of accordion title. You see the title just came back after we added the attribute. Let's just jump back into our post and refresh that. Keep in mind that we had a text field here just a moment ago. Everything looks the same, but as you can see, there's no more text field and the text inside of our header just became editable. So this is just a rich text component that you know from the paragraph when you create a new block, and you can just write any text you want here. Now, interesting feature. I mean, it's not really a feature, it's more of a bug. When I press the space key, the content is actually showing and disappearing. We'll fix that in a bit. But yeah, you now have editable content inside of your accordion. You can style it any way you could style other text in WordPress. This makes your blog just so much more interactive without any extra work. So you see that there's some inconsistencies in terms of behavior. The fact that the accordion is opening every time you click the text is kind of annoying me. And obviously that space thing is a bug. So let's save that. And let's just jump back into our editor to fix this. Right, so let's start with creating our script file, like so. And to illustrate actually a problem that you're going to face, especially with enqueuing JS in the editor, is that the JavaScript is going to run immediately. So let's just say we're going to create an initAll function where we're going to look for all accordion details. And then for each of them, we're going to run an init function. And in this init function, we're going to say accordion style color red. I'm just going to call it like so. You see it's going to turn red, as it should. However, if we go back to the editor here, reload, you see that nothing changes. Okay. If I update and go to the front end, it also worked. However, the problem inside Gutenberg is that at the time the JavaScript executes, this block hasn't loaded yet. So JavaScript actually has no idea it exists.
I don't know.
Blockstudio has a handy way to circumvent this issue. And this is by using a particular event that exists for every block and that executes after it's been loaded in the editor. So that event starts with Blockstudio and then is just the name of the block. So it'd be UI accordion and then ends with a loading. So we're actually going to do an array out of that and call it. So for each event, we're going to say document add event listener event, and we're going to call our initAll function and save that. And if everything went correct, it should have worked, and it did. So let's also call this when the DOM content has loaded, so it looks a bit cleaner. Now, for the actual first issue of the content opening when we click any of the rich text, we would want to stop the accordion from executing its default behavior when clicking. So we're gonna attach an event listener to accordion click to the accordion, handle accordion click, and we're going to say if the target contains the class RichText, then it should prevent the default behavior and just return. Obviously, this is going to still work here since the RichText class not applied in the editor. But in Gutenberg, this should work now. And as you can see, the content's not showing anymore unless we click outside of it. So now we can freely edit this text without worrying that the content might show. Let's just give this an accordion title again. Now you still see that the other issue is still persistent. So every time we press the spacebar, content is showing. And this is, I assume, because that's just the default behavior of the details HTML element. So let's go back. All right, so one thing I want to do before we continue with fixing the spacebar issue is make sure that this function here only runs once per element. So we're gonna say accordion class list add loaded. No, this happens at the end, of course. And in the start, we are going to check if accordion class list contains loaded. We're just going to return this class. This just makes sure that the content of this function will only run once per element. To fix the spacebar issue, I've tried some things prior because I only encountered that bug when I was actually making this video. And it wasn't that easy to fix, I have to be honest. I came to this solution of removing the onClick handler on the details element when either focusing the RichText element or losing focus. So we'll create a new function called toggle details behavior and call it the element. And the second parameter is going to be disable. So either disable or enable it. And we're going to say that details element is the actual details tag, and if it exists, we are going to say details element on click. If we disable it, we're just going to say prevent the default function, which is opening or closing it, otherwise do nothing. And inside here, we're going to say query selector all RichText. I mean, it's only run one RichText element per accordion, but this just saves us writing the handler twice. Element on focus, toggle behavior, element. Obviously, when we're losing focus, we want to restore the original behavior of the element, which is opening or closing. So we set this to true. And on blur, which means I'm losing focus, we're going to toggle the original behavior, set this to false. Now let's format that again. And if everything worked, and we're going to reload the editor, this should not open anymore. And it doesn't, as you can see. But obviously, as soon as you lose focus, this just returns to its original behavior, which is great. And I think we're pretty done now in terms of the actual accordion element. I think the behavior is working nice. There's no bugs. We can freely adjust the formatting without the component or the block misfunctioning in any way. Cool. So the next step is to actually add some actual content in here instead of just a placeholder. Let's go back to the admin. This is actually going to be one of the more easier tasks because it's all done already for you. Inside our rendering template, we are just going to replace our little content div with an InnerBlocks tag. And this will tell Blockstudio and WordPress to give us an area where we can add more blocks into it. So just replace this here and save that. There should be now an editable area here. As you can see, type to choose a block. You can say I want the heading, my accordion content. And if you will look into the document overview, that you can see that it's now part of the accordion. So this basically behaves like the group block or the column block. It just accepts other blocks into it. And yeah, you can freely add more images here if you want to. I have now uploaded media, so I remove that again. And maybe let's add another accordion, just so we have two different options here, or two different accordion types. My other accordion title. Let's add another heading here. Let's call this accordion content. There we go. Now, I actually haven't talked about how those components work on the inside. So if we go back to the admin, you see that we have two tags that are available in Blockstudio. This is the RichText component and the InnerBlocks component. So what happens when these are being used in a block and rendered inside Gutenberg? They're basically being replaced by their React counterparts. So RichText obviously gets the RichText component, and the InnerBlocks component will be replaced with the InnerBlocks component. These are core modules that are being used throughout pretty much all core blocks. If we type in quote, you see that this is just another RichText component. So you basically have access to all the React goodies without writing any React code, which is awesome, I think. If we update this and go to the actual front end, you'll see that the RichText element is replaced with the p tag, how we defined it, and the InnerBlocks component is replaced by its actual content, which is just pure HTML. So you see that you get the best of both worlds, interactive elements in the editor and just plain old HTML tags on the front end. Cool, so let's continue. Let's go back to the editor here. Now, I would say that the accordion block, as it is now, ready to be used. Obviously, you can add more styling, add an icon to, add an extra field for the icon, so this one can be changed. However, what I want to do in this video is kind of mimic the behavior a lot of core blocks have. So if we look, for example, the buttons block, it has a parent block that only accepts another button because they can add specific behavior to a button group, which makes a lot of sense. And this is also the same with columns, for example. I think on the example of the accordion, this also makes a lot of sense. Actually, let's get rid of those two, because we're going to add the group in a moment. All right, let's start by creating a new folder for our group block. And inside this folder, we're going to create a new block. Let's quickly go into the JSON, change this icon, something more meaningful. And the rendering template is going to be really simple. It's just going to be an InnerBlocks tag with a class of accordion group, let's say. And we want to limit blocks that are allowed inside this parent block. So we're going to create a variable and say escape attribute has to be escape, since we're going to use it as a HTML attribute for the InnerBlocks tag. So I'm going to say UI accordion like so. So I'm going to say the allowed blocks are those blocks. And we're also going to set the template to the same variable. So when you insert the accordion group, there's going to be at least one accordion in there already. This is also pretty common behavior with all of the core blocks, so it makes sense to just copy that. And we also want to limit the accordion to only be able to be inserted inside of the accordion group. So we're going to set the parent here to UI accordion group. Okay, let's just check that. Reload accordion group. And you see an accordion was automatically inserted inside the group here. And WordPress already smart enough to just say add accordion because it's the only block allowed in this parent group. So if we add another one, you see it gets edited accordingly. I'm just going to give this a title again and the same here. And let's just do some content to content accordion 1 and content accordion 2. Okay. Now, this is cool. Now we're kind of following rules how other common blocks are structuring their children. Or their inner blocks, not children. I'm thinking in React terms here. So let's maybe add some styling. So, same thing again. Gonna add our style file. And here it was called accordion group. And let's do some border first. Border 1 pixel solid, like so. And maybe some border radius as well. Let's go with 0 to 5. REM. See how that looks right here. Cool. Now, I think what also would be nice is a separation in between. So if there would be like a line going through here, you can do that by just using the plus CSS selector. So for every accordion that's following another accordion, you're going to say border top 1 pixel solid and use the same color, like so. If we reload, you will notice it's actually not working.
What?
Now, if we go to the front end, just update this, you'll see that it is working.
Oh, okay. I see what you did there.
Now, what is going on here, you're wondering? Let's go back to the admin. Oops. Maybe let's remember this selector we set. So accordion following another accordion should have the border top 1 pixel solid and then gray. Now this is obviously happening here, as we can see, right? So we have the accordion group and it's followed by 2 accordions. Now, if we go to edit post, if we inspect the code here, I mean, if you've been around Gutenberg from the very start, you know exactly what the problem is. And the problem is that there's actually a wrapper element around our accordion block. WordPress is creating this wrapping tag so it can attach all the listeners and make it function how it is functioning. So with all those controls and stuff like that. So we could theoretically adjust our CSS and take the extra wrapping div into account. However, there's an easier way with Blockstudio. And again, very simple. All you have to do is add the useBlockProps attribute to your accordions. And by doing so, you're telling Gutenberg that this outside element, so this div tag, should be used as the root element inside your editor. So if we go back to front here and reload, you'll see that the line is added accordingly. And if we inspect again, you'll see that all the WordPress specific classes are being added right on the element we defined or where we added the useBlockProps at. Okay, I hope that made sense, but you're basically removing the wrapping block, which makes styling and accessing the DOM much easier. I mean, it makes it the same as the front end, which is such a crucial part in developing blocks in WordPress. Another added benefit of that is that, for example, we select this accordion block and we'll add a class of my custom class. Because we're using the useBlockProps feature now, this block is going to be automatically added to the element that we defined here. So it should say now accordion, my custom class next to it. And if we check You can see that this is true. WordPress is putting some other classes in between, but there's my custom class and the accordion class that we set. And if we check this on the front end, this is going to be the exact same accordion, my custom class. And WordPress is adding its own block classes to the markup as well, which makes it very handy. For example, if you want to add an anchor, maybe let's just do that. We can add an anchor in the block JSON. I have to add the supports and set the anchor to true. Now we jump back to the front and reload here. You'll see that it now has an anchor tag. And we say that this is my special anchor. And if everything worked correctly, then the first accordion should have an ID of my special anchor. There it is. Okay, so now that the parent and child relationship is in place, I think we can enhance the functionality of the accordions a bit. So right now, multiple accordions can be open at the same time, right? But I think it would be beneficial if we had the option to just have a single accordion open at one time. The group is the perfect place to add that behavior since it applies to all the accordions inside of it. So we're gonna add an attribute with the ID of open1. And this is going to be a type of toggle. And as a label, we say only allow one accordion to be open at a time. Cool. Now in our accordion JSON, we can just use the context of this group block inside our template file. We can open one, I think I called it. We can check for this context, which is going to be accordion group open one false. We either get the value of the attribute of our parent block or it's going to return a false value. Just have to check. So let's just echo that. Open one true. Else we say false. I should say false here, obviously, because there's no value set in this preview. However, in the Gutenberg editor, we are getting false now both times as well. However, if we set this to true, you see that both values of each independent accordion react to the attribute we set in the parent block, which makes composition really easy and helps with encapsulating functionality like only opening an accordion at one time. So let's go back to our admin and remove this again. Let's write the actual logic here. So let's say if, or maybe we put it in an attribute, say if open1, say data open1, else render nothing. And then here we are going to say php echo that attribute. So we can actually use that in our JavaScript. So that was all sorted. And inside our JavaScript, we can use the existing handle accordion function. We need the details because we are clicking on the accordion here. Const details current target, and if details has attribute, how do we call it again? Data open1, we are going to loop through all accordions on the page and say accordion details open. For each of those items, we are going to check if this is the current detail that is being clicked, like that. If yes, let's return it. Otherwise, we're going to remove the open attribute, which should then close it. Just format that. And if everything went right, no. What did we miss? There was the click handler, yes. Data open1, that's correct. Let's just see if this attribute is being applied properly. Oh, that was the problem. I didn't set the toggle. And now you can see it actually works. So if we deactivate that, then you can open multiple accordions again. And if we enable that, then obviously only one can be opened at a time. Cool. Now, of course, the world's your oyster at this point. You can add functionality to always keep the accordions open with a similar toggle like that. Whatever makes sense at this point. But in regards to the video, I would consider this group and this accordion finished for now. So let's just go to the front end and just review our work there. It's working how it should. Only one accordion is opening at the same time. I think we deserve some confetti or the finale. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed that walkthrough. I mean, we barely touched the surface here. There's so much more you can do with Blockstudio. I think we only use 2 fields, right? Field types. We use the toggle and the text in the start, which we then later replaced with the RichText element. But there's also so much more about the admin, different asset types, NPM modules that you can fetch and download locally. I will be going more in depth in those topics in future videos. But yeah, for this one, I just wanted to have a hopefully compact, we'll see how long this is going to be after editing, run through of how to create actually useful blocks that go past your basic text fields. If you're keen to learn more, head over to documentation. I try to always keep this up to date. I've also written a bit about the philosophy behind the plugin and why I think it's so great. So yeah, see you next time. Bye.